Hey there, Chiefs family. I'm Dustin Davis. Let's jump right into today's update. Kansas City stands at a crossroads familiar to championship contenders. The roster carries proven talent, the coaching staff commands respect across the league, and the front office has earned trust through years of calculated moves. Yet, two persistent gaps remain. Gaps that could determine whether this season ends in confetti or quiet frustration. The Chiefs organization faces a decision that transcends individual games or matchups. Their ground attack has failed to establish dominance when needed most, while the interior defensive line continues to show vulnerabilities that opponents will exploit in January. These aren't minor adjustments. They're foundational issues that demand resolution before the stakes become irreversible. Across the league, front offices are weighing their own futures against the calendar. Some will gamble on one more push, others will begin planning for next year. Kansas City has the assets, the window, and the urgency. Let's check out everything that's been happening in Kansas City in the last few hours. Before we continue, may I ask for your support? If you like what we're sharing, just take a second to hit that like button. It really helps us. Thank you. Kansas City approaches the November trade window confronting operational realities that cannot be ignored. Their offensive line struggles to generate consistent push in short yardage situations, and the interior defensive line continues to show vulnerabilities that opponents will exploit in January. These aren't minor adjustments. They're foundational issues that demand resolution before the stakes become irreversible. Rather than surrendering premium draft compensation for uncertain returns, the organization could explore a straightforward roster swap. One player exchanged directly for another, targeting an immediate shortage while maintaining future flexibility. This approach preserves the strategic foundation the franchise has built while acknowledging the narrow window available to contending teams. Tennessee finds itself in vastly different circumstances following a catastrophic start that has effectively ended their playoff hopes before Halloween. The new regime appears willing to evaluate all trade scenarios involving players outside their core rebuild, particularly if such moves yield younger assets with contract control beyond the current season. This philosophical gap between Kansas City's win-now urgency and Tennessee's longer-term planning creates natural trade alignment. Kansas City would send cornerback Joshua Williams to Tennessee in exchange for defensive tackle Sebastian Joseph-Day. The framework is simple, the contract's manageable, and the positional fit's clear. Williams has demonstrated legitimate NFL capability during his time in Kansas City, showing enough technical proficiency and physical tools to warrant continued opportunity at the professional level. However, the Chiefs' secondary has added competition through both the draft and free agency, gradually pushing Williams further down the rotation. With his role diminishing despite his competence, exploring trade scenarios serves both the player's career development and the team's immediate roster needs. Tennessee recently dismantled significant portions of their secondary, shipping starters Jarvis Brownlee Jr. and Roger McCreary to the Jets and Rams, respectively, in exchange for late-round selections. Former Chiefs executive Mike Borgonzi now oversees Tennessee's personnel decisions, creating familiarity with Williams' skill set and potential trajectory. While some skepticism exists given the disappointing returns from the L'Jarius Sneed acquisition earlier this year, Borgonzi's previous experience evaluating Chiefs defensive backs could work in Williams' favor. The Titans need bodies capable of competing immediately while they reconstruct their defensive backfield. And Williams represents a low-risk addition with proven game experience. For Kansas City, Joseph-Day offers something the current roster desperately lacks: a veteran interior presence capable of stabilizing rotations without becoming a liability in pass rush situations. The tackle position has become increasingly problematic following the loss of top draft selection Omar Norman-Lott, leaving Kansas City dangerously thin at a spot that opposing offensive coordinators will attack throughout the postseason. Joseph-Day would operate alongside Chris Jones rather than carrying the burden of anchoring a dysfunctional Tennessee defense, immediately upgrading his effectiveness through better surrounding talent and scheme fit. He provides competent run defense, adequate pass rush production for a rotation player, and the experience to function reliably in high-leverage situations. While watching Williams depart represents an unfortunate end to his Kansas City tenure, addressing the defensive line shortage outweighs sentiment when championship windows close quickly. The exchange requires no draft compensation, maintains salary cap flexibility, and directly targets the Chiefs' most glaring weakness, entering the stretch run. Kansas City cannot afford to enter postseason play without credible depth at defensive tackle, and this swap delivers that security without mortgaging future resources. Meanwhile, another veteran name continues to surface in trade discussions, one that could transform the offensive identity entirely. Connor Orr of Sports Illustrated identified Kansas City as an ideal destination for additional backfield talent despite the concurrent need for defensive line reinforcement. His reasoning centers on maximizing the current championship window rather than waiting for future draft classes to develop. The specific target Orr proposes comes from New Orleans, where organizational direction remains uncertain following a disappointing season, and the asking price appears surprisingly modest given the player's established production. Alvin Kamara represents Orr's suggested acquisition, acknowledging that the veteran has publicly expressed reluctance to leave the Saints organization. However, Orr frames Kamara less as a traditional between-the-tackles runner and more as a matchup weapon, capable of functioning in Kansas City's motion-heavy scheme, essentially filling the unique role Tyreek Hill once occupied on third and short situations where his speed against linebackers created automatic conversions. The compensation Orr outlines involves a 2026 fifth-round selection and a conditional 2027 sixth-rounder, late-round picks that rarely yield impact starters for an organization consistently drafting near the end of each round due to sustained success. Given Kansas City's track record of identifying talent throughout the draft and their immediate championship objectives, surrendering these selections represents minimal long-term cost for significant short-term upgrade. Kamara has delivered consistent production throughout his NFL career, all spent in New Orleans despite the franchise's recent instability. Through the season's first 8 weeks, he has accumulated 363 rushing yards across 100 attempts, demonstrating continued effectiveness despite the Saints' broader offensive struggles and his advancing age by running back standards. Beyond immediate rushing contributions, Kamara's receiving ability and football intelligence provide schematic advantages that extend Andy Reid's play-calling options in critical moments. He functions effectively aligned outside the tackle box, creating mismatches against slower linebackers or forcing defenses to reveal coverage intentions pre-snap through their personnel adjustments. That versatility enables more motion concepts, misdirection schemes, and empty formation packages that generate explosive plays against confused defenses. Kansas City's offense currently lacks a true receiving specialist at running back, limiting their ability to threaten defenses horizontally while maintaining downfield vertical threats. Kamara fills precisely that void, offering the route-running precision and hands reliability to function as a legitimate third receiver on obvious passing downs. This ability shortens the adjustment period typically required when integrating mid-season acquisitions, since his role would involve specific packages rather than learning the entire offensive system. The practical obstacles cannot be dismissed. Kamara's current contract carries significant salary implications. The Saints must agree to trade a franchise cornerstone, and the player himself would need to embrace relocation. However, evaluating the football merits in isolation reveals an ideal marriage of skill set and opportunity. Kansas City gains a matchup weapon that immediately reduces the burden on Pacheco and Hunt, while adding dimensions their offense currently cannot threaten. For the compensation Orr suggests, this represents a calculated gamble with substantial upside and limited downside risk.
On the defensive side of the ball, a high-upside pass rusher has emerged as the ideal finishing piece for this championship-caliber roster. While Kansas City will likely pursue interior defensive line help through various channels, the most impactful trade deadline acquisitions typically involve edge rushers capable of creating immediate disruption. Among the available candidates, Jaelan Phillips of the Miami Dolphins emerges as a realistic, high-upside target whose contract situation and team context make him attainable for a contender willing to invest modest draft capital. Phillips currently plays under the fifth-year option from his rookie contract, a structure that has delivered nearly $28 million since Miami selected him with the 16th overall pick in 2021. The 26-year-old's career trajectory has been complicated by significant medical setbacks, a torn Achilles in 2023, followed by an ACL tear in 2024, but his pre-injury production demonstrated legitimate impact player capability. Across 42 career games before those injuries, Phillips accumulated 52 quarterback hits, 24 tackles for loss, and 22 sacks, numbers that project to elite annual production over full healthy seasons. Phillips has started all 8 games for Miami this season following his recovery, demonstrating the durability and availability that teams must verify before committing trade assets to players with recent injury histories. His raw sack total through 8 weeks, just 2, initially appears disappointing and might dissuade casual observers from recognizing his actual impact on opposing quarterbacks. However, Pro Football Focus credits Phillips with 27 total pressures and 21 hurries through the season's first half, numbers that reveal consistent disruption even when failing to complete the play with a sack. PFF's pass rushing grade for Phillips sits at 80.4, ranking him 14th among 119 qualifying edge defenders league-wide. That evaluation places him comfortably within starting caliber performance despite playing for a struggling team with limited defensive surrounding talent. The Dolphins' 2-6 star has effectively ended their playoff aspirations and positioned them as likely sellers before the November 4 deadline. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reported significant trade interest surrounding multiple Miami assets, including wide receiver Jalen Waddle and pass rushers Jaelan Phillips and Bradley Chubb. The organization faces legitimate decisions about which pieces fit their longer-term plans versus which assets should be converted into draft capital while value remains. Phillips represents a logical trade candidate because Miami may hesitate to commit long-term financial resources to retaining him beyond his current contract, given their salary cap constraints and roster construction challenges. Contending teams would view him as a mid-round draft investment that also provides immediate postseason impact, creating natural trade market demand. For Kansas City specifically, Phillips offers a player capable of complementing Chris Jones in sub-packages, slotting into rotational edge responsibilities, and generating consistent pressure through technique and athleticism, rather than relying solely on physical dominance. The immediate pass rush upgrade Phillips provides only tells part of his value story. He brings schematic versatility that allows defensive coordinators to deploy him in multiple roles, setting the edge against power running schemes, bending the corner on speed rushes, and functioning in sub-packages where his athleticism creates mismatches against tight ends or tackles ill-equipped to handle lateral movement. That versatility matters enormously for an offense, yes, offense, that depends on motion concepts and matchup manipulation, because a consistent external pass rush threat loosens interior blocking schemes and creates more one-on-one opportunities for Chris Jones to dominate. When edge rushers force offensive tackles into honest vertical sets, interior defenders gain cleaner rushing lanes and better angles to attack quarterbacks. Phillips' ability to win those edge matchups would immediately improve Kansas City's entire defensive front performance. Obstacles certainly exist in any potential deal. Phillips' contract status requires clarification regarding Kansas City's willingness to extend him beyond this season. Cap implications must be managed carefully given the franchise's existing commitments. Miami's front office must decide whether moving on from Phillips aligns with their broader rebuild strategy. Still, the likely compensation required for Phillips should remain within reach for an organization prioritizing its current championship window over distant future considerations. The Kansas City Chiefs cannot afford to enter postseason play without multiple credible edge rush threats, and Phillips represents one of the few proven veterans available who combines immediate availability, scheme versatility, and realistic acquisition cost. Could Jaelan Phillips be the game-changing edge rusher Kansas City needs to complete their Super Bowl roster? Share your opinion. Is Phillips worth the risk for a championship run? Give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Join the community for exclusive daily content. We're here to keep you updated with everything going on in Kansas City. See you next time.